I started by marking the sheet. I drew a vertical line in the center, a guide for the figure. Then I outlined 2 buildings on the sides. I imagined 2 tall buildings with domes similar to the towers of temples or castles. I drew the lines freely without a ruler. It was important for me to preserve the feeling of handwork, as if this was a draft of something large. On the left, I built a dome from several tapering sections. I added a cross-shaped structure at the top, something like a weather vane, but a little abstract. On the right, the tower turned out to be higher, stricter, with a sharp spire. At its top, I depicted a symbol resembling a star with drops. I deliberately made it disproportionate to emphasize the strangeness. Between the towers, I placed a human figure, most likely a magician or a witcher. I started with an oval head, then added a wide-brimmed hat with a pointed end. I depicted the body schematically: a simple shirt, a short skirt or cloak, legs and boots. I initially wanted him to stand with his back to the viewer, looking at the sky. I drew his arms hanging freely, with visible fingers. It was important to show his passive but tense pose. The most interesting thing is the spiral in the sky. I drew it slowly, starting from the center. It symbolizes a portal or a vortex, something energetic. The spiral captures all the attention. It seems to draw the gaze into the drawing. When I finished, I added some hatching to the towers so that they seemed more voluminous. But I did not overdo it. I wanted to preserve the lightness of the sketch. The whole work took about 40 minutes. I did not erase anything. I like it when the process is visible, how the thought turns into a line. First, the base of the background was painted with a fan brush, a blue gradient from light at the bottom to saturated at the top. The fan brush allowed for soft transitions. On a dry surface, a spiral was drawn with alternating red, orange, yellow, and silver colors. The medium brush was used to draw twisting lines, adding strokes around for a vortex effect. The stars were applied point-wise with a thin brush in yellow and orange paint. The houses were drawn with a medium brush. The walls were painted in a warm burgundy red color. The roofs with a pattern, in violet blue tones with golden strokes. The windows, outline, and unevenness of the buildings were highlighted with a thin brush to convey a fairy tale atmosphere. The central figure of the witch is made in dark shades. The details, the collar, skirt, hat, were drawn with a thin brush. The lines are clear to highlight the figure against the bright sky. The silhouette is in the Gothic style, emphasizing the mysterious atmosphere. After the background and main elements have dried, details are added with a thin brush, illuminated windows, highlights, an ornament on the roof, and magical elements around the towers. The final touch is accents of white paint to add volume and glow. The author's work, Witch Under the Spiral Sky, is an expressive and symbolic work, executed in acrylic on thick A3 paper, which combines naive style, elements of surrealism, and fairy tale expression. The picture is not only visually rich, but also conceptually multi-layered. It opens up a fantasy world to the viewer where the architecture is deformed, the sky swirls into a magical whirlpool, and a person, in the form of a young witch, appears as a guide between reality and mystery. The central composition is built on a strong vertical, set by the figure of a girl in a black robe and hat, standing between 2 fairy tale towers. The viewer seems to look over her shoulder, immersing himself in her point of view, which creates an effect of involvement. This construction enhances involvement in the plot. We are not just observers. We are participants in a magical event. The perspective itself is deliberately distorted. The buildings lean inward, forming a funnel shape, as if drawn into a spiral in the sky. This creates a sense of instability of space, emphasizing the tension of the moment. The composition is reminiscent of the works of Marc Chagall or Vincent van Gogh, where architecture and the sky become part of the emotional experience, and not just a background. The color palette plays a key role in the emotional perception of the painting. The dominant shades, rich ultramarine and bright red, create a contrast between the cold of the night and the heat of cosmic energy. The spiral in the sky is executed in red-orange tones, referring to fire, destruction, but also to rebirth, a motif often found in occult and alchemical symbolism. The windows of the houses glow yellow, a warm, homely light, which contrasts with the restlessness of the night sky. These small islands of comfort against the backdrop of the approaching cosmic vortex give the scene psychological depth. There is still life inside, despite the magical or apocalyptic events outside. The lines in the painting are extremely expressive, almost childish in their naivety. But this is what gives the work a special sincerity and inner energy. The curvature of the lines, especially in the outlines of the houses and the spiral, emphasizes the dynamics, the vibration of space. The black line outline along the perimeter of the elements refers to the technique of stained glass or animation, which makes the image even more expressive and graphic. The figure of the witch is drawn discreetly, almost as a silhouette. But this is precisely what enhances her significance as a conductor or mediator. She is the focal point, but at the same time, the emptiness through which the viewer looks into the depths of the picture. Symbolism and interpretation. The central element of the composition is undoubtedly the spiral, an ancient symbol of infinity, cosmic movement, hypnosis, and a portal. Her vortex shape can be associated with a black hole, a galaxy, a witchcraft spell, or the opening of a door to another world. This is a motif of transition, transformation, possibly initiation. The figure of the witch is an image of strength, knowledge, solitude, and magic. Her black clothes and hat refer to the classic image of a witch, but in the artist's interpretation she does not frighten, but evokes sympathy, interest, and admiration. She is young. Perhaps this is her first experience of magic, her first call to power or a clash with the unknown. The houses, curved and bizarre, like living creatures, can symbolize the inner state of the witch. Everything around breathes, sways, changes under the influence of her emotions or ritual. The layers of paint are dense, the strokes are legible, especially in the sky. The use of 3 brushes, thin, medium, and fan, allowed to create a variety of textures, from soft transitions in the sky to sharp, clear contours of buildings and figures. This speaks of the artist's understanding of materials and mastery of acrylic technique, despite the naive stylization. The witch under the spiral sky is simply a child's fantasy or a stylization of a fairy tale. It is a visual myth reflecting internal states, searches. The painting has strong emotional energy and deep symbolism. It balances on the edge between a dream and magical realism, reminding the viewer that art is not always about the realism of form.